The rancher hadn't planned to stop that day. He rarely did. The road cutting through his land was long, empty, and familiar, bordered by dry grass that whispered whenever the wind passed through. He liked that road because it asked nothing of him. No memories, no explanations, no promises. Just miles and dust and the slow rhythm of hooves and tires. He was thinking about the fence that needed fixing near the north pasture when something small and still caught his eye. At first, he thought it was a stray calf or maybe a broken post. Then he saw the movement, a child's hand lifting, hesitating in the air. He slowed the truck despite himself, irritation flickering in his chest. People didn't come out this far unless they were lost or desperate, and he'd learned long ago that desperation had sharp edges. The little girl stood by the fence, no more than 7 or 8, her dress faded and too thin for the weather. Dust clung to her shoes, and her dark hair was pulled back with a ribbon that had clearly seen better days. Beside her stood a woman, slightly behind, as if trying to make herself smaller. The woman's coat was worn, sleeves frayed at the cuffs, and her hands were red and trembling, whether from cold or fear he couldn't tell. The rancher stepped out of the truck, boots hitting the ground with a dull thud. "You folks lost?" he asked, keeping his voice flat, guarded. The little girl shook her head quickly, then lifted her chin with a courage that didn't belong to someone so young. She tightened her grip on the woman's hand and spoke before the woman could stop her. "She can cook, sir. Please take her in." The words landed harder than he expected. He blinked, taken off guard, and looked from the child to the woman. The woman's eyes widened in embarrassment, and she tried to pull her hand free. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice barely there. She shouldn't. But the girl didn't let go. "She's very good," she insisted, her voice steady but her fingers trembling. "She makes bread and soup and eggs, even when there's almost nothing. She works hard. We won't be trouble, I promise." The rancher felt something tighten in his chest, a reflex he didn't like. He'd heard pitches before, people asking for work, a place to stay, a chance. Most of them ended badly. He lived alone for a reason. Solitude was easier than disappointment. Easier than memories of a house once full of voices that had faded into echoes. "I don't need help," he said, more sharply than he meant to. "And I don't take in strangers." The girl swallowed, but she didn't cry. That, more than anything, unsettled him. Children usually cried. This one just nodded slowly, as if she'd expected the answer. She looked up at the woman, her eyes softening. "It's okay," she said quietly, trying to be brave for both of them. The woman's shoulders sagged, and for a moment the rancher saw something raw flash across her face, fear mixed with resignation, the look of someone who had run out of doors to knock on. She met his gaze then, not pleading, not accusing, just tired. "Thank you for stopping anyway," she said. "We'll move along." They turned, and that should have been the end of it. That's what the rancher told himself. He could get back in his truck, drive on, and the road would go back to asking nothing. But as they took a few steps away, the wind lifted the girl's thin dress, and he noticed how small she really was, how her shoes were cracked at the soles. He noticed how the woman subtly shifted her body, placing herself between the child and the world, even though she looked like she barely had strength left. A memory surfaced uninvited. His own kitchen years ago, warm light, the smell of food, laughter spilling into rooms that now sat silent. He pushed it down, jaw tightening. "Wait," he said, the word escaping before he'd decided to say it. They stopped. The girl turned first, hope flickering in her eyes like a fragile flame. The woman looked wary, as if afraid hope might hurt more than refusal. He cleared his throat. "I've got an extra room. And chores that don't do themselves." He paused, then added gruffly, "You can stay a night. We'll see after that." The girl's face lit up, relief pouring out of her in a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She squeezed the woman's hand. The woman's eyes filled, but she nodded, pressing her lips together to keep control. As they climbed into the truck, the rancher told himself this was temporary. Just one night, just a small kindness. He didn't yet realize that with a few simple words from a little girl, the quiet he'd built his life around had already begun to crack. They reached the ranch just as the sun dipped low, spilling amber light across the fields. The house stood the way it always had, solid, quiet, and a little worn, like its owner. The woman hesitated on the porch, as if afraid to step on something that didn't belong to her. The little girl, however, hopped down from the truck and turned in a slow circle, taking everything in with wide, curious eyes. "Is this all yours?" she asked, awe softening her voice. The rancher nodded. "All of it that hasn't wandered off," he said, attempting humor and surprising himself when the girl smiled. Inside, the house smelled faintly of wood and dust, the scent of a place lived in carefully, sparingly. There were no photographs on the walls, no signs of a woman's touch, only clean surfaces and furniture chosen for function rather than comfort. The woman noticed immediately. Her gaze moved over the space with respect, as though she understood the language of emptiness. "I'll show you the room," the rancher said, grabbing a lantern though the lights still worked. Old habits. He led them down the hall to a small bedroom that hadn't been used in years. The bed was neatly made, but the air was stale, untouched. "You can sleep here tonight." "Thank you," the woman said softly. She rested a hand on the bed frame, grounding herself. The girl bounced once on the mattress and then froze, glancing at the rancher as if worried she'd crossed a line. He waved her off with a shrug. "I'm going to start supper," the woman said after a moment, instinct taking over. "If that's all right." He almost said no. He didn't need anyone cooking in his kitchen. But the look on her face, hopeful, careful, stopped him. "Suit yourself," he replied, stepping aside. She moved through the kitchen like someone remembering a song they hadn't sung in a long time. Her hands found the pots, the knives, the flour, adjusting to unfamiliar shelves without complaint. The girl sat at the small table, swinging her legs, humming quietly. The rancher lingered near the doorway, pretending to check his phone while watching the scene unfold. Soon, the house changed. The dull air warmed, filled with the scent of baking bread and simmering soup. It wrapped around him, pulling at memories he hadn't visited in years. He sat down heavily at the table without realizing when he'd decided to stay. When the woman placed the bowl in front of him, she did so carefully, like an offering. "It's simple," she said. "I hope that's all right." He took a bite. The taste was nothing fancy, salt, warmth, patience, but it hit him hard. He swallowed slowly, eyes fixed on the table. For a moment, he couldn't speak. "It's good," he finally managed. The girl grinned, pride lighting her face. "See, I told you." The woman laughed softly, a sound surprised out of her, and quickly looked down, as if afraid it didn't belong here. They ate in a silence that wasn't uncomfortable. The rancher noticed small things, the way the woman watched the girl eat first, how she tore her own bread in half to give the child the bigger piece, how the girl chattered about the horses and the cat and the swing she hoped the tree might hold someday. After supper, the rancher stood to clear the table, then stopped, unsure. He hadn't shared a meal with anyone in so long that the rules felt unfamiliar. The woman was already there, stacking plates. "I can do that," he said. "You already did enough," she replied gently, and something in her tone made him step back. Later, as the night settled and the wind pressed softly against the windows, the girl yawned, fighting sleep. The rancher showed her the way to the room, watching as she curled beneath the blankets with a contented sigh. The woman lingered in the doorway, eyes shining in the dim light. "She didn't mean to put you on the spot," she said quietly. She believes kindness still works." He nodded, unsure what to say. As he lay awake that night, listening to unfamiliar breathing down the hall, the rancher realized something had shifted. The house no longer felt empty. The silence had changed. It wasn't the lonely kind anymore. It was waiting. Morning came softly, not with the usual weight of routine but with unfamiliar sounds. The rancher woke to the clink of a pan and the low murmur of a child's voice. For a moment, disoriented, he lay still, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he'd dreamed the night before. Then the smell of coffee drifted down the hall, followed by the faint, steady rhythm of humming, and he knew it was real. He pulled on his boots and stepped into the kitchen. The woman stood at the stove, hair loosely tied back, sleeves rolled up. The little girl sat on the counter, swinging her legs, narrating the morning as if it were an adventure. They both looked up when he entered, surprise flickering into shy smiles. "I hope you don't mind," the woman said quickly. "I didn't want to wake you, but she was hungry." He shook his head. "It's fine," he said, and meant it. They ate together, the light pouring in through the windows, touching corners of the house that hadn't seen morning laughter in years. After breakfast, he headed out to check the fences. To his surprise, the girl followed, boots too big for her feet, determination making up the difference. The woman trailed behind, offering help without insisting. He showed them the barn, the horses, the fields that rolled out like a promise. The girl asked endless questions, and for the first time in a long while, he enjoyed answering them. The woman listened more than she spoke, absorbing the place, as if learning its rules before daring to belong. Days passed. One night became two, then three. The woman found her rhythm, helping with chores, cooking meals, mending small things around the house. The girl claimed the ranch cat as her own and named every horse, convinced they understood her. The rancher told himself it was temporary, but each evening he found himself looking forward to the sound of their voices. One afternoon, he returned from the fields to find a swing hanging from the old oak tree. The rope was sturdy, the knot careful. The girl sat on it, feet skimming the ground, laughing as the woman pushed her gently. The sight stopped him cold. He hadn't realized how much he'd missed laughter until it filled the air again. That night, as the sun sank low and painted the sky in colors he rarely paused to notice, the girl leaned against him on the porch steps. "This feels like home," she said simply. He swallowed. Home was a word he'd buried, too heavy to carry. But hearing it in her voice didn't hurt the way he'd expected. Later, after the girl had gone to bed, the woman joined him outside. The stars were sharp and bright, the quiet deep but no longer empty. She folded her hands, gathering courage. "We can leave," she said softly. "I know this was only meant to be for a night. You've given us more than enough." He looked at her then, really looked. He saw the strength beneath her weariness, the way she had begun to stand taller, the hope she tried not to show. He thought of the meals, the laughter, the way the house breathed again. "I don't want you to go," he said, surprised by the steadiness of his voice. "If you'd like to stay. Both of you." Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't rush him with gratitude. She nodded slowly, respect first, relief second. "We'd like that," she said. Weeks turned into months. The seasons shifted, and the ranch changed with them. The woman's laughter came easier. The girl grew taller, braver, more certain. And the rancher found himself changed too, less guarded, more present, learning again how to share space, how to care. One evening, as they sat together at the table, the girl looked up at him with the same seriousness she'd worn on the road that first day. "I told you she could cook," she said. He smiled, a real one, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "You were right," he replied. But he knew now that what she'd offered him wasn't just food. It was warmth, it was healing, it was a second chance at a life he'd thought was finished, and a family he hadn't known he was still waiting for.